Hello everyone. Hello everyone, and a very warm croiso to this morning's big conversation on diversity in a rural context. I'm Phil Holyman. I'm 1/3 of Little Earthquake, which is a theatre company based in the West Midlands, but I'm also one of the artists on the NRTF board, and I'll be chairing the session with you today. I'm very proud to be up on the stage here alongside Gabrielle, our BSL interpreter, and our 4 fabulous panellists, who will each in a little bit give you an overview of some very important things that they want to say and share with you. But I hate speaking about panel guests as though they are not here with me. So instead of me introducing them, I'm going to just invite them to go along the line and just introduce themselves directly to the lovely people sat out in the audience, starting with Sonia.
Hello, I'm Sonia Sabri. I'm the artistic director of Sonia Sabri Company. We're a dance and music company based in Birmingham, and also I'm an independent dance artist.
Thank you, Sonia. Anna?
I'm Hannah Pryor. I'm a board member for Arts Alive and also a promoter. I'm also a theatre maker, and I run an organisation called Ignition, and we make participatory work with people typically excluded from taking part in theatre.
Hello, good morning. I'm Terry Adams. I'm Relationship Manager Diversity at Arts Council England, and I'm based in the South East.
My name's Jo Verrent. I'm senior producer for a commissions programme called Unlimited, which is funded through the strategic diversity pots within Arts Council England with other funders as well. And we work across the whole of the UK and increasingly internationally. But I live in Bradford, not in London.
Thank you all. When I got first asked to chair this panel, I very gently said no, because I didn't think that having a white, gay, middle-aged man who makes theatre was the right person for this job. Because apart from the Black Country accent, the sector's not really short of people like me, so I don't really think I'm the actual face of diversity for this session. And the most shocking thing is, punters, I went to Oxford as well. With a voice like this, can you imagine? But in the spirit of mobilising the NRTF board, I was persuaded to say yes, and I decided I would say yes because it was my opportunity to do something to try and stop this session being like most of the other sessions on diversity most of us have ever been to in our lives, where we do a lot of talking about talking and we don't do much afterwards. And Little Earthquake is a really big believer in a community being responsible for its own health and its own growth, and for driving its own processes of change. And back in 2017, we stopped whinging about what was not right in the Midlands, and we set up a network called East Meets West to try and do something about the things that needed doing by getting the members of the community involved in making it happen. And we had a 2-day symposium that kept coming back to the idea of the people in the room and what they were going to do about the things that needed to change. And we had a mechanism to inspire them to action that was shockingly inspired by the world of sport, from, very appropriately considering where we are, Sir Dave Brailsford, after whom the university's sports centre is named. And when Sir Dave took over Team GB and Team Sky, he set about trying to make changes, not big sweeping changes, small incremental ones that over time would build up to make a genuine difference. And so it was things like the shape of the cyclist saddles and what time they had their breakfast, what their pillows were made from. And within 2 years of Sir Dave joining Team Sky, Bradley Wiggins won the Tour de France. And at our symposium, we challenged people to make 1% pledges. Tiny things that they were prepared to do that would make a difference to the regional sector, on the assumption that if the 100 people we had at the symposium all made their change, we'd have 100% improvement. And it works, because I've seen it work. There are things going on in the Midlands now that came out of people being prepared to do a little thing to make a difference. And so today, a few hundred metres from the Canal Fan Brailsford up the road, I am going to challenge everyone here to make your own 1% pledges, to do one small but realistic thing that will help to improve the diversity of this sector. And Sian, my beautiful and capable assistant, is now going to scamper around the room issuing my little bits of paper on which I will invite you to make your 1% pledges, and let me have them by the time you leave the session or by the time you leave the conference, and I will turn them into a list and I will circulate it so that we're all accountable to what we're doing, and I will keep in touch with you about what your pledge is and when you do it and what comes of it, because at a quick glance we must have at least 120 people in this room now, and if we all follow through on our pledge, we've already improved the diversity of this sector by 120%, and I cannot wait to see the massive differences that your small changes are going to make. And on behalf of the people who need those changes to happen, I thank you in advance for doing it. But let's crack on with the big conversation. Sonia, as the guinea pig on my left, it falls to you to be the first to share what's important to you with the people in the room.
So we were given some prompts, and I very passionately have been touring in the rural circuit for 10 years. So I thought being on this platform would be a really a valuable insight as an artist, as well as a company director, in terms of what experiences we've had as a touring company in the rural circuit, and very happy to share our learnings, and very happy to share with artists what the things they should be looking out for when they are touring. Having first-hand experience, I think, is the best way to really gauge what's to be expected or what's unexpected. I'm also here to learn from others what your experiences have been like as a promoter or as an artist in the touring circuit, and how things may have changed or may not have changed. And I feel, without sounding very or at all cocky, but I'm really proud to be British. I'm born in Wolverhampton, and I feel very passionate about the country that we champion, and I tour internationally very regularly, and I'm so proud that we have a beautiful country which has such a diverse community. We need to open ourselves up. We need to be more, I suppose, receptive of the communities that we are living amongst. And I think the arts and the culture, the provocative thoughts that we have, the inspirations that we have, we need to learn from each other. We need to share that. We need to have a discourse. We need to have trend-setting, change-making conversations, and really capture what this country has to offer. And there isn't another country like this, and I cannot champion that enough, because of the nature of our work, and because of where we actually reach out to, not just nationally but internationally. What drives me is to share my work. I'm a performing artist. I love performing. The nature of my work is that there's a lot of interactivity, so audience engagement is something that we really thrive on. It's the demand, I suppose, of the dance practice that I do, which is Kathak, but also the live music element that we bring in. That's key to our work. We perform to audiences, maybe 20 in the room, but up to 1,500, 2,000. So the ones that really we remember, we cherish, are the ones that we go into when we're in a church hall or some kind of pub venue. Those are the moments that we really, really thrive on. And, you know, sometimes we're so kind of, we would have a set, I don't know, like a set dance, but we improvise because the audience is responding in a particular way. And our audiences are intergenerational, so that's the type of audience that I'm really, really passionate about engaging with. Art is to be shared, so that's what drives me. That's what drives me to go into the beautiful places that we have here. We do touring work which is both contemporary but also with a classical idiom. We have group pieces, we have solos, we have live music with dance, we have film with live music, we have a lot of wraparound activity, so a lot of opportunity to do educational work or workshops, or even setting up mini festivals in venues that may be able to adapt with that. The lessons that I've learnt, you can never prepare enough. to be as adaptable as possible. I'm quite an adaptable person. I think rural touring was a calling, actually, for me. So if I have a clean space, I'll perform. So that's pretty much as it goes. Being self-sufficient, so as a dance artist, I think, or taking care of artists, I think there have been times when, yes, venues are colder than perhaps a dancer expects or a musician expects. So I would just advise, I think, to, artists need to just really make sure that they've got their gear, so they are prepared, and so they are not, let's say, warming up on a cold floor. There are little tips and little fragments of wisdom that I can offer there. And I'm here to answer any questions about the company's work, my experience, dance, film, workshops, shows, festivals, anything that we've got coming up, and any practicalities that you feel that have hindered, or you haven't booked dance before, you haven't booked music before. If there are any questions that you think haven't been able to ask previously, please do ask them today.
Thank you, Sonia. Anna?
Sorry, I've just spilled water down myself. It's a good start.
It's fine.
It's
You're
fine.
amongst family now.
Yeah,
You can
I'm
do it
styling
alone.
now. It's all good. Didn't get that, did you, Rach? So as I said at the beginning, I'm a theatre maker. I specialise in working with children, young people and adults who are typically excluded from taking part in theatre experiences. So this might be through disability or through rural location. I also work a lot with non-arts partners and within the third sector and also the local authority to really look at removing strategic barriers, so money, and other barriers to participation. My work as a theatre maker and as a strategic changer very much informs my role as a trustee and promoter with Arts Alive. I have a disability myself, which I was born with, but it only really started affecting me around 8 years ago. So I understand what it's like to live in a body that works and also a body that doesn't really work very well. And I know it's quite easy sometimes for disability not to be on your radar if it doesn't impact you. I also understand that some people find talking about disability really difficult and uncomfortable. And kind of along this theme, I've developed a training programme which actually piloted with Arts Alive called Open Access, which looks at inclusion and disability awareness. We ran it very successfully with the Arts Alive promoters and volunteers. I fundamentally believe that everyone has the right to access artistic experiences and that the arts can have a much wider social impact on all of us, and particularly on those who have barriers to inclusion. For me, those barriers to inclusion focus around 4 separate areas. So they are organisational barriers, informational barriers, attitudinal barriers, and environmental barriers. And I think all of these barriers for us as promoters, as village halls, as schemes, as organisations, we can look at these barriers and we can think about how they apply to our environment. I'm aware that a lot of you are volunteering your time and often resources can be limited, but as Phil talked about at the beginning, small actions can have really big impacts. And I think particularly if everybody has the understanding of the message of inclusion, so it isn't just something that one person is in charge of, everybody has that understanding of what the message is. We can solve barriers to inclusion if we're prepared to be open and check our own prejudice or understanding and to look at those 4 barriers, so that organisational, informational, attitudinal, environmental. So for example, if you are a village hall and you only ever have a show at 7 p.m, that's all you ever do, all your shows are at 7 o'clock, potentially you're excluding audience members who might find it difficult travelling in the dark or might find it difficult travelling later in the day. And I'm not saying we don't want to exclude our current audiences. Obviously, we need to make sure that we are including them in this process. So it's about just making small changes. It may be about just having one show in your menu that is at a different time. Within the Arts Alive training that we ran, there was some discussion around environmental barriers. So things within your village halls that can be challenging in terms of access. One of the things that came up was somebody said there was no floodlights and they couldn't afford any floodlights within the village hall. And obviously money is a big issue. Resources are really challenging, particularly when it's being powered by volunteers. But we talked about what the solutions might be to that. So we talked about what about having somebody with a torchlight. So that if there is somebody that is finding getting to their vehicle challenging in the darker light, that there is somebody there who's got a torchlight. Something that's a kind of shorter term solution, and maybe longer term look to be able to have those resources to impact on that environmental situation. We don't have to have the answers immediately, but it's very much making people aware that we're open to this problem solving, that we are aware of the issues around access, and we can do this by just having really simple, perhaps, messages on our websites or our organisation or information. So something like, we are keen to make our performances as accessible to all as possible. If you have any questions around access, please call or email us. Start that dialogue, start that conversation. You don't have to have all of the answers up front. As well as a social good for new audiences mean more revenue for your village hall. Last year I promoted a show, The Bone Ensemble, Where's My Igloo, which I think lots of people saw here as a showcase. It was an absolutely fantastic show. And we sold this show out. It was a mix of disabled children, non-disabled children, non-neurotypical children, and neurotypical children, who all enjoyed the performance together. It was a diverse audience that was made possible through my connections as a theatre maker within the communities that I work in. However, there are people like me in your communities. You may be one of those people. So it's tapping in to those people, making those partnerships, and looking at people who are already working with children and people who may have these contacts, which may be within England through the Bridge organisations for the Arts Council or the local cultural education partnerships. But being able to have a succession for your audiences is important. So I think we talked yesterday about succession for staff and succession for promoters, but actually engaging children and young people within your audiences is also important as part of your succession plan. Even if you only offer one family show a year, you're building your audience base. In terms of things you can ask me about relaxed performances, using lateral thinking to remove barriers for new audiences, engaging children and young people as audience members, and embedding inclusion into your business plan. So that's me.
Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Terry.
Okay, good morning. So, as I said, I am a Relationship Manager at Diversity for Arts Council England. You will be aware that the Arts Council is not short on information and detail on diversity. I'm going to read just one. In terms of our approach to diversity, we believe that art and culture should reflect the talents and stories of all our communities in the work that we commission, curate, produce and present on our stages, in our concert halls, community halls and across our galleries and museums. And I think furthermore that work that we do present should be seen and reflective of audiences that we have within our communities. I think it is important that when we think about diversity, we have to think about what diversity means in its general context, but more importantly, what it means to our communities and the audiences in which we serve. It is important from our perspective to ensure that our organisations and artists that we fund have in mind their diverse audiences and the extent to which their work is likely to appeal to them. And diverse audiences, when we talk about diversities, we're talking about the 9 protected characteristics of the Equalities Act 2010. We at the Arts Council, in addition to those 9, also had add-on social economic groups. So we're talking about a wide group. And one of the things that is central to our approach to diversity is what we at the Arts Council call the creative case for diversity. I wonder if I could get a show of hands of those who have heard of the creative case for diversity. That's a good number. Keep your hands up if you understand what we mean by the creative case. I can see my colleagues that have yes. I mean, I say that because the creative case for diversity is a cornerstone of our approach to diversity. And it is so because we do believe that in terms of programming, diverse art really adds innovation, it adds excitement, it adds inspiration to the work that we see on screen. on our stages. And it is important that there is a diverse talent line that is coming through, that is reflective of our changing and our ever-changing communities. And their audiences can see themselves reflected, their stories, their lives on stage. I could go on, but you know there is so much on our website in terms of diversity, and I think some of the other panellists that I've got some really excellent suggestions about what diversity means. So I think what I will leave you is think, when you think about diversity, it isn't only about making sure that there are some brown faces on the programme, or there are some people in wheelchairs in the programme, but it reflects the broad cross-section of what your community means. Those from lower socioeconomic groups, younger audiences, elderly audiences, LGBT audiences, that is what we mean by diversity. It's in its broadest context, and it's not just ensuring that once a year you have some African drummers.
Thank you, Terry. Gail?
Okay, so why am I on this platform? So I run a commissions programme, and I've brought some bits of information about that if anybody wants them. We had over 300 applications last year. 3 had the word rural in them. So we know within the large community of disabled artists, rural touring is not necessarily featuring in their thinking in the way that it could be if they were thinking about sustainable careers. There are many, many different reasons for that. Is it all based on assumptions that nobody would want their product, or that places aren't accessible? Or is it not in their thinking because everybody is fast-tracked and fast-wired to aim for big venues and stellar success in numbers kind of game? So through Unlimited, we're really interested in partner commissions. So we're working with Barnum Maltons at the moment on a co-commission. What if we work together where we share our expertise around commissioning disabled artists, Barnum share their expertise about commissioning and working directly within rural communities to create a piece? Can we learn from each other? And we're doing co-commissions with a range of partners that we think have something to teach us. So we're working with Great Ormond Street Hospital, we're working with the Forest of Dean Sculpture Trail, we're working with the Welcome Collection. So all art forms and all scales of partners. Because we're really interested in people taking access and diversity seriously, but also pragmatically. So we had this kind of list in our heads of what we might need to do. We know about ramps. We're really good at knowing about ramps. In fact, we quite often get really scared about ramps without thinking that wheelchair users make up 5% of all disabled people. So it's kind of like, if you don't have a ramp, actually, there's still 95% of disabled people you could potentially be working with. So not having a ramp, not necessarily the end of the world. But we're a little bit rubbish at thinking about some of the other ways to engage other groups within the kind of disability diaspora. My overwhelming belief is that diversity is far more interesting than non-diversity. I think it adds texture and taste, and I just think it's where the most interesting product is. Thank God, because it's where I work, but it's also, I just think that intersectionality is what audiences really want and crave. I think we're seeing it on the television now, we're seeing it through films. It really is showing in audience appreciation. And sometimes we might be a little bit behind the curve on that. We're worried about what our audiences might want to see when they're sat at home watching Pose, or they're sat at home, watching a disabled person win RuPaul's Drag Race, disabled winner this year. Britain's Got Talent, disabled winner last year. It's our moment. Audiences are not running screaming away from disabled people in the way that perhaps we think they might do. We were asked about our driving passions. I've got equality, diversity, quality, intersectionality. So I'm really interested, just because I'm a disabled person, it doesn't mean that I don't have a sexuality or a family life, or where those intersections are, I think is really important and really interesting. And I'm really interested in honesty. At the moment, I think we're telling people quite a lot of lies about the cultural sector. I think we're telling audiences lies about product. I don't think we're necessarily as honest as we could be in our conversations. So I'm quite interested in what we can take from Extinction Rebellion in terms of tell the truth. My principles, I think access comes from care. Access is about taking care of people, and it's about not making assumptions about who should or who shouldn't access a particular piece of work. So I'm hearing impaired, I start to lose my hearing at 13. If you don't caption, video trailers, then I will turn them off because I can't access them. If you don't have some form of captions, interpretation, or even just give me the script, I'm quite flexible, I can read before I come along, but I need something, and I need to know I can contact someone to have that conversation with. Otherwise, I just can't be asked to make the effort to sit there in a room and not understand what's going on. So I think access comes from care, and it needs to be like words on a stick of rock. It needs to be absolutely everywhere throughout anything that you do. It's not just about your audience, it's about how you run what you do. But I think diversity comes from giving a fuck. I think diversity is political. It's about really recognising the injustice and inequality that is hardwired and inbuilt into the systems that we've actually created. So these systems haven't come from nowhere. We've set them up, we continue to run and maintain them, and they continue to be exclusionary. So if we care about that, if we want to make a difference about that, then we actually have to be that difference. And we have to be the one in the room that's continually saying, no, this isn't good enough. I know we can do better. I know we can include more people. Lessons I've learnt: there's no such thing as fully accessible. There are too many access needs to possibly have something that is fully accessible. I've got one person who's setting up lying down cinema experiences because they can't sit in a seat for a long period of time. If everybody set up a lying down event, that would exclude my mother, who might be able to lie down. She certainly won't be able to get up again. So we have to be able to respond to individual requests rather than assume just by ticking a few boxes we can lay everything down and do that. Lessons I've learned: nothing will change until some of us give up power and control. So we quite like power. Once we've got it, it tastes quite nice. It's quite comfy. But actually handing that over to other people, not just asking other people what they think, but actually giving over power to other people to do something, I think is really important. And I do think some of the newer access considerations, like lying down or like online activities for those of us who have fatigue-related impairments. I had to go to bed at 10 o'clock last night. It didn't matter if the show hadn't finished. If I stay out beyond 10, I can't get up the next morning. I work from bed 2 days a week. I can't physically move my body around in the same way that some other people can do and keep working. I just can't do it. So I watch a lot of stuff online, and I think it's going to be really interesting seeing how that develops in the next... I've gone to marches online from bed. I've actually got a robot I can send off in my stead. Robot, iPad on a stick, on wheels. We're starting to see really innovative ways, and I think they're really going to transform what we do. So ask me about access and inclusion for artists, participants and audiences. Ask me for incredible product, because we can't see enough diverse product. I mean, it's quite a shame that everything I've seen here has been quite so wonderful and diverse, because that makes that seem really rubbish now. Ask us how you can become an ally of Unlimited. We have an allies scheme where we help you and you help us, and also in the we created a card game. It's really heavy. I'll pick it up. There we go. Cards for Inclusion. We ripped it off Cards Against Humanity in both name and form, but we've got a card game where you have to have a situation, an art form and an access barrier, and immediately start thinking of solutions. So it's about exactly what you were saying, getting people to think creatively about overcoming, in some cases, quite ridiculous barriers. So this is available free to download, but also we mail them out to people if they actually want a hard copy. That's me.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. So we are now at the questionsy bit. We've got some roving microphones that are about to start roving. So if you've got any questions for anyone on the panel, please do wiggle your hands in the air and we'll get a microphone to you. What would be wonderful, before you ask your question, is if you could say who you are and what your organisation or art form or whatever is, so that we all have a bit of a context for your question and we get to find out who you are as well. That would be lovely. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask to get the ball rolling? Peter Gregory, Esquire. Mike's on its way, Pete.
Thank you. Peter Gregory from the Night Out scheme in Wales. Joe, I just wondered, you said we're lying about lots of stuff. What are we lying about?
Oh, shed loads. I think it comes. I think we're lying to artists in terms of telling people that there are massive numbers of sustainable careers out there for work. I think we endlessly lie to people coming to shows because artists are writing copy before the work's created often, and we don't tell people that. You know, we just kind of, you know, that's made up. I think we so want numbers, we so want bums on seats. We pretty much tell people anything that we think might get them into a venue, rather than actually being really clear about what the work is and who it's for, and actually spending more time really targeting you know, those interactions and having it as a conversation. I think we lie endlessly to the Arts Council in our monitoring forms because nobody knows how many people, we're not collecting the stuff we're then telling them we are collecting. If anybody has a brilliant way of instantly knowing the sexuality of people attending events, tell me, because I'd love to know how to, cop off more widely. It would be great. But nobody's saying it. Nobody's saying we don't have a way of measuring this, but we're still sending in this data. I can go on it indefinitely on the lies. That's not fair.
She said that. Anyone else have anything they would like to ask someone? Gabbin, and Stephanie's on her way with the microphone.
So there was somebody here who had a question before that's nearer.
I'm all shy.
Taya, we'll do Gabbin and we'll come to you next.
Okay, so it's partly a question.
And who are you, Gabbin?
Gabbin and I'm from Panellists, and I work with Joe and yeah. No.
Yeah, we push buttons and it'll stop flashing and it'll go on. There you go. Oh, right. Okay, thanks. So I'm Gavin Stride. I work for Arnhem Maltings and we're working with Joe on the Unlimited Commission. And it was only to make an observation as much as to make a statement, but I know that Joe would agree, is to say that that idea of giving away power in order to be able to work collaboratively is really needs emphasising. It is probably the most uncomfortable I've felt in a commissioning process ever, because the only way it was going to succeed was for me to recognise difference. And I think we still too often think we can carry on doing the same things but also operate successfully with people not like us, and that's completely mad. The other thing I would say, and it's partly a challenge to Joe, but also to myself, is we offered out a 25 grand commission and we had 4 applicants, which felt, when we were really struggling to find people who were interested in working in rural touring, and I would quite like sometimes to unpick why that was true.
I mean, I have to say that everybody who works on our partnership commissions is stretched far more than they imagine they're going to be. Quite often we have people coming to us going, oh, this will be a really easy way of boosting our creative case rating or something like that. And we don't always go, it's going to be a bit difficult sometimes. You're going to feel uncomfortable sometimes because we're lying. We don't want to necessarily put them off. But I have to say that Gabbin is brilliant because you always talk about when you're uncomfortable and you always check things out. You know, we have a lot of emails back and forth going, can I say this? You know, is it okay if? And actually that's the kind of conversation, that's the kind of hand-holding that is really important. You need to do that with somebody next to you in order to help you be brave enough to go there, because otherwise we're just going to program the same stuff in the same way and get the same audiences and get the same results. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Tayo, you had a question?
My name is Tayo Aluko. I'm a performer. This is probably a question for people that run schemes. I suppose that promoters, there are certain promoters, you may recommend a show, but if the promoters are uncomfortable, the show does not get booked. So are you able to give any examples of reasons that people give and maybe then suggest or ask or discuss how we can get around that? Because it's fine to be able to say at a place like this that we need more diversity, but it doesn't always happen. So we need to be able to expose and tackle whatever the barriers are.
Silence from the audience.
Who's up for it?
Right, well, I'll try and answer your question. I'm Carrie Mills. I'm the live events programmer for Arts Alive. I've only been in post 3 months, so this is a novice's answer. I think that our volunteer promoters are nervous about taking risks on things that they don't think their communities will come to because they're unfamiliar. That is what I'm gathering at the moment, 3 months in. But I think it is our responsibility as programmers to make them challenge their audiences. So the creative case for diversity in all of the season selection, menu, whatever schemes are calling it, it has to have enough choice for our promoters to not always go for the safe option. But we, as scheme managers, need to have the confidence to be able to share the excellent qualities of all of that work, to handhold and reassure our volunteer promoters that it would be good to choose this, even though it's unfamiliar and it may be taking a risk and it may be new to their communities, but just to go for it. So it's about hand-holding, it's about a lot of the things that Hannah was talking about, making sure that the environment's right, the space is right. But above all, I think it's about your promoters having the confidence in you as the scheme manager to have made selections which are really good quality and very much need to be seen. I think that's an answer.
Sarah, just behind, I think wants to pick up. Is it picking up on the same point, Sarah? Yeah, Mike's coming.
Just to add to what Karen just said, I think there's also something around the product that's available, because I feel that if I offer diverse work, to be honest, it flies off the shelf with my promoters. They can't get enough if I can offer culturally diverse, disabled work, something that's different. I had 3 or 4 people who wanted Mr. and Mrs. Clark. I've had, but I can't offer enough, and that's not necessarily to do with not knowing what's there. I'm afraid it comes down to affordability. A lot of the time it's to do with resources and affordability, for me, running a quite small scheme. And so, I think that sort of needs to be said as well. So I don't have a problem, really. I'm sure other people agree with me that Natalie, you chip in.
I'll take, if it's all right, I'll take one more response to that point and then we'll jump on to another question. Okay, perfect.
I'm Mary Coles I'm a promoter from Road Water in West Somerset. I just wanted to reiterate exactly what Sarah said. I was going to say exactly that. For us, we love diversity, we love having all sorts of things, but it's money. We can't afford to put on many productions unless we can cover some of our costs. We do accept losses, but not too much of a loss, because we're voluntary, everyone's voluntary. Nobody's getting paid for what we do. And our village hall has to survive. So just to say, we love you all, but we can't always afford you. And you do need to have something a little special as well for us to pick you up. See what I'm saying? Thank you.
Francis, do you want to jump in on this one?
Oh,
Give the microphone a tap for me, Francis. I'm not sure if it's working or not.
it shouldn't be flashing.
Should I just speak loudly?
Yeah.
Yeah, use your best stage voice now.
My best stage voice. Okay, so Frances Land from Black Country Touring. So one way we approached this was working with Arts Alive. So it's Arts Alive and Black Country Touring and another company called Carly, where we created a piece of work that felt safer, I suppose. So people were involved in the creation of that piece of work. So it was a piece called My Big Fat Cowpat Wedding. It was sort of about urban, rural, but also about cross-cultural. So it was about cross-cultural marriage. But people were sort of involved in the process of that, and it felt safe. I think, would you agree, Sean? I think people knew about the kind of development of that piece of work. It felt like a piece that was not going to be a risk for promoters to get a good audience. And we proved it. It sold out everywhere it went. So I think
It was also offensive to everybody.
It was all.
It challenged everybody, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
suppose.
So it wasn't safe in that respect.
But I mean, yes, it did. It was challenging, but it was funny as well. So you dealt with kind of sensitive material, but you did it in a way that was accessible and not too daunting. So I think for us it is about the involvement of people in that process. So it isn't so scary, and promoters are that trusted. They're the trusted kind of gatekeeper to that audience. So they have to feel safe in doing that and actually then selling it to their audiences.
Wow. Natalie, did you want to? Have we got? Is that mic working, Charm?
Yes.
Fab. Would you be able to pop it over to Natalie? Natalie's going to pick up on it, I think.
Thanks. I'm trying to find the question in my observation, so you might help me. We're talking about artists, we're talking about audiences, but from our perspective, actually, firstly, our rural touring world in Norfolk and the East is actually diverse in Terry's definition of diversity in the creative case. I mean, we're working with people who are mainly 65 plus, they are socio-economically challenged, there is a lot of hidden disability in that age group, and very often they are the lower engagement, lower participation audience segments. So that's pretty diverse as far as I'm concerned. But the other areas of diversity, those other 9 protected characteristics, are areas that we want to pick up on. But very much our promoters look like the audience that they're selling to. The one caveat is that doesn't work with young people. And so we're interested in not trying to encourage our existing promoters to do more and be more for everybody else in the community, but to find out whether we can diversify the types of people that promote through our scheme. And for us, that's the sort of a key challenge that we need to address, and we're not doing very well at it, and we don't know why we're not doing very well at it. We don't know that if it's a cultural sort of miscommunication, as you were saying, around those 4 barriers, or whether there's something about us not actively saying. And something we've been doing recently is sort of looking at all of our communication and saying, well, what aren't we saying? And what should we be inviting people to engage with our work? How should we be doing that? So do you have a view on not the audience and not the artist, but the person who champions the coming together of both of those elements, being the driving force for diversity in rural touring?
I think there's always a challenge if kind of people don't see themselves represented in the people that are doing it. So it's always a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? Because like if it's younger people, for example, if it's an older person that's actually doing the promoting, they might not think that that's a place for them. So I guess it's kind of getting that message around that you are kind of open to having kind of, you know, new and diverse promoters. And I suppose it's probably about finding partnerships with people where those people are. So perhaps for children and young people, like I was talking about within my talk, perhaps looking, I don't know if you've got a bridge organisation or a local education partnership, but linking in to kind of places where children and young people are, organisations that are working with children and young people, and then asking to link in, partner with them to be able to develop your promoters programme. So I know kind of within Shropshire, I'm the chair at the moment for the Culture Consortium, which is the local education partnership there, cultural education partnership. And, you know, there's things around kind of, Kerry, you know a little bit more about the programme that was, they're not promoters, but they're doing reviewing, aren't they? The writers, so young people.
Yeah,
Sharp, yes, as well.
Yeah, it's voice.
Voice, yeah. So young person's voice, they're kind of reviewing shows, they're going to performances, but it's linked in through the Culture Consortium. So it's kind of finding those places, you're not having to reinvent the wheel. So finding those places where those people are, and then finding ways to partner with organisations that can support you to do that. Because I think if you're putting cold call-outs for kind of new promoters, you might get the odd person, you know, who just happens to think that that's for them, but actually you need to find a way to break down those barriers, to go to those people, perhaps take some of your promoters with you to kind of give the benefits, you know, things that they do, and then find out reasons why, you know, why perhaps wouldn't this be a place for them, why is it a place for them, and then use that to kind of echo into being able to find kind of more promoters to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, children and young people do a lot of work with
Yeah.
young promoters.
Yeah.
We find that they're the only ones,
Yes.
so the only subgroup who don't want to promote for their own kind.
Okay.
But you know, but yes, that, you know, that approach of partnering with agencies that can help us.
Yeah. And the other thing is learn from each other as well, because if there's kind of people in the room that are doing it fantastically already, if your kind of response is working really well with children and people, or somebody else's is working well with another group, find out from each other what's working. And obviously geographically, we are all different, and the setup within our communities is different, but there are things we can learn from each other to be able to replicate.
I would echo exactly what Hannah has said. I think it is about being proactive, and I understand that there's a lot of voluntary work out there, but it does mean more work and more activity. I think it's going to be important to identify exactly what it is you're looking to achieve, who it is you're looking to target, and then go out there and do a little bit of research, find the people who are doing the work that is reflective of what you want to do, and maybe things that you're not thinking about doing. But it is about engaging and putting yourself out there. And when you do come across those people, have those discussions, and what does that offer from your perspective look like, and what is it they can offer you? And then have to find where the middle ground is, and then work out how best you might be able to work together in the future.
And there's a lady just over halfway back next to Tom.
Thank you. My name's Mary Toomey. I'm from a very tiny village in North Wales called Cwmpamachno. And I think in relation to this discussion, it's really important to remember that we put on shows through the excellent Nos an Athlan scheme, Night Out scheme. But it's important to remember that that is only a tiny proportion of what we do. We're a very, very active village for all sorts of reasons, mainly financial. We can't afford to put on too many of the kind of shows that we are able to access through Nos an Athlan. But I would say that it's easier for us to address issues of diversity, etc., in the things that we do that are not through the scheme like that. Just because, and it relates to something that Sonia said, I think, right at the beginning, it's about talking to people. It's about having a dialogue with performers or people who are going to become performers, or thinking about, well, this doesn't work. There are people who are not coming on a Saturday evening, so should we do something on a Saturday morning? It's that kind of thing. But it's really quite hard to have that kind of dialogue with performers. because there's a lot of pressure there. There's a pressure to sell tickets, there's a pressure to get people through the door, etc. And as you said about sending the stats back to the Arts Council, that's the bottom line, is how many tickets did you sell, really? Even though we know that's not the primary purpose, I would say, of putting on events. Certainly, community cohesion, building community, and also that challenging, the opportunity to challenge is one of the purposes. But I think we have to remember this is taking place in the context of a lot of other activity that's going on, certainly if other villages are like the village where I live. And so an opportunity to have that dialogue with a performer before they come would be immensely helpful. It's not always possible, and there's one time when it absolutely isn't possible, and that's when a performer has an agent. Performers with agents are just terrible. it's the agents that are terrible, not the performers.
Can I just sort of pick up on that point about numbers? Obviously numbers are important, but it isn't numbers in and of themselves. What we're looking for is good engagement, appropriate engagement, and progressive engagement. So you might start with 10 people for one particular act, but then if you are brave enough to put that act on again next year, you might get 12 people. And 12 people obviously is better than 10. And
I should just say numbers are not an issue. I'm not saying numbers are an issue, they're not. I'm just saying let's not forget that this is all happening in another context, a wider context, where, and in that wider context, we're actually able to have more nuanced conversations than we often are when we're working with performers who are travelling long distance, who are worried about the practicalities of how do I get there, where I'm going to stay, and all of that kind of thing.
Yes.
So I don't know how you build in those kind of opportunities, have those nuanced conversations. And Sonia, you touched on it really well, I think, when you were talking about preparation and being flexible and whatnot. So that's what I'm talking about, really. I'm not worried about numbers.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
I think what I'd add just in terms of building a community understanding around difference, I think the nuanced conversations you can have after a piece of work are absolutely invaluable. So, I always use my mother as an example, but it's like, when I took her to Assisted Suicide, the musical. And it opened up a whole range of conversations that we just hadn't been able to have, before, about end of life and, what her, and she had so much to say that I would have missed out on had we not, but I think art is just the best vehicle for providing a stimulus for all kinds of stimulating conversations. For me, yes, it is entertainment, but it's so much more than that, particularly in this context.
Sian, do we have time for one more?
I think we have about 4 more minutes.
Excellent. Gail, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll shout. I won't wiggle and jiggle.
There's a mic on its way. Mic's on its way.
Yeah.
So it's Gail Ferren from Blaze. We run artery and live links touring in East Riding and North Lincolnshire. And I think just to reiterate, all the points that everybody's made are all very valid, but it's just to also put out there that capacity is a massive issue. It's not always about funding being the issue. It's about the amount of time that we have to spend. Not only are we putting out a menu, supporting our promoters, putting on events, print, publicity, everything else. We'd like to be a community cohesion and a community development organisation and take those approaches. But a lot of rural touring schemes are literally funded to put on X number of dates in X number of places, and they would aspirationally love to do all of the conversations, work intensively, have residencies, invite people in to work in a more meaningful way. But it's not always possible with capacity of the promoter and of the scheme manager. And I would like to say that we'd love to do lots more, but it is, for example, for me, I already work about 4 times more than I'm actually paid for, and I think a lot of people in the room may be similar. So it's not that the aspiration and the want isn't there, it's a capacity issue as well.
I think it's back to what Phil said at the beginning though, you don't have to change the world overnight and you don't have to do 100 things. It's just pick a small thing and it may be a thing that you're already doing really well anyway, and you just spend a little bit more kind of, I know time is very limited, but kind of looking at where you are now, what are you doing well, and what can you grow from there. So it isn't kind of going off on, massive new journeys, it's growing where you are if capacity is really limited. And then kind of just really marking that for yourself as well. So, even if it is just small incremental changes, they are still changes. Each of those changes will have an impact. And so it's kind of marking those, even if it's over a longer period of time, you'll be able to see for yourselves as an organisation, and you'll be able to hopefully see the benefit of that as well in terms of your audiences and the shows you have.
I've got the mic and I'm going to say something. Gail said it's not about funding, blah, 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 it's about time, and I would say time is about funding. And I think in this room there's so much capacity to do so much more, but it isn't funded at the moment.
Fab. Sharon, you're the lady on the clock. If we've got time for one more, we will absolutely take one more.
Hi, my name's Allison Williams. I'm from the Dragon Theatre in Barmouth. And I'd just like to say that as a promoter, I'm not really looking at how a show is made or who's in it or whether they have disabilities or the colour of the skin or anything else. I'm looking for the story, I'm looking for the message, and I'm looking for the show and the beauty of the art. So I'll book something because I really like it and I think I can make other people like it, not because of who's in it or anything like that. That's all I wanted to say, really.
Go on, we've got time to push it for one more.
Right, then we've got to make one announcement at the end, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Quick comment. Philippa Morn from Western Australia. Studies into the greatest change happening in Australia is the single greatest change to encourage greater diversity is having diverse representation on boards, and that creates a flow through the whole organisation and the whole programming. Thank you.
That's definitely time for us to wrap up. Lunch is almost with us. I will be lurking at that door to grab any 1% pledges you might have already been inspired to make. I'm around for the rest of the 2 days. I would love you to pass them to me or a member of the conference team. I've come up with mine. I'm going to pledge right now to stop using the word diversity. And I'm going to replace it in my thinking and in the way I speak to people with inclusivity. Because Dawn Badland at one of our board meetings was talking about the quote that diversity is whether you invite someone to the party, inclusivity is whether you ask someone to dance. And I'm going to spend from now a lot less of my time worrying about who's being invited to a party and making sure that I'm getting as many people to dance at as many parties as I can possibly manage to do. Thank you all for making this one of the least cringe sessions on diversity I've ever had the privilege to take part in. A massive thank you to Gabrielle for her BSL support. A big thank you to Sonia, Hannah, Terry and Joe, and to all of you. Thank you and enjoy lunch.